Hello everyone, today I'll be presenting on The Boy and the Heron, specifically focusing on Natsuko and her increasingly complex relationship with Mahito, her stepson. At first glance, Natsuko doesn't seem like the center of the film, especially compared to the magical creatures in the surreal world that Mahito travels through. But once you pay attention to the emotional core of the story, you realize that much of Mahito's journey, his grief, his confusion, his growth, is deeply tied to his evolving bond with Natsuko. Their relationship represents not only the challenges of a blended family, but also the delicate and painful process of trying to rebuild a sense of home after tragedy. My main argument is this. Natsuko's overly anxious, protective, and emotionally fragile personality shapes a strained relationship with Mahito, who is still grieving the loss of his mother. However, despite this tension, Natsuko ultimately becomes a source of emotional healing and growth for him, even if neither of them recognize it at first. Her presence, her mistakes, and even her disappearance also become catalysts for Mahito's transformation. Now, who is Natsuko? Natsuko occupies one of the most complicated roles someone can have. She is both Mahito's aunt and now his stepmother. That dual identity immediately places her in a difficult emotional position. She is connected to Mahito's past through his mother, but expected to help shape his future as his new caregiver. She is also pregnant, which makes her even more emotionally vulnerable and eager to create a peaceful, stable family environment before the baby arrives. But that eagerness becomes pressure on her and Mahito. Even early on, you can sense that Natsuko is trying to figure out how to be enough for Mahito without erasing the memory of his mother. That's an impossible emotional tightrope to walk, and it sets the tone for this entire relationship. Now, to understand Natsuko's behavior, we have to examine her traits. First, she is protective, but not in a confident or authoritative way. Her protectiveness comes from fear that she will never live up to Mahito's expectations, fear that she is overstepping, and fear that she will lose this family if she makes a mistake. She is also sensitive to the moods of others. She immediately notices Mahito's discomfort, his senses, and his sadness. But rather than communicate openly, she tiptoes around him, hoping gentleness will draw him in. Another key trait is that she is conflict avoidant. She doesn't challenge Mahito's withdrawal, nor does she set clear boundaries. Instead, she retreats into silence and gentle pleading, which ironically makes Mahito feel even more pressured. Finally, she carries a quiet sense of guilt and emotional exhaustion, which may stem from her connection to Mahito's late mother. Natsuko seems to feel that she doesn't quite deserve this new role and that insecurity affects everything she does. On the other side of the relationship is Mahito, who is still going through very raw grief. He has lost his mother in a traumatic way, and instead of having time to heal, he's uprooted from his home and placed into a new environment with a new parental figure. To Mahito, Natsuko feels like an attempt to replace his mother, even though she never claims that role. His emotional walls go up immediately. He becomes quiet, detached, and at times even resentful. Mahito doesn't reject Natsuko because she's unkind. He rejects her because he's overwhelmed. He doesn't know how to let anyone new into his emotional world, especially someone so closely connected to the mother he's trying not to forget. The inner conflict shapes how he responds to every attempt Natsuko makes to get close to him. Now, how their traits clash. When we look at Natsuko and Mahito together, their traits collide in a way that almost guarantees misunderstanding. Natsuko tries to bond with Mahito through gentle attention and emotional availability, but to Mahito that feels like pressure to open up, pressure to adapt, and pressure to accept a new parent before he's ready. When Mahito pulls away, Natsuko internalizes this as a personal rejection, not a sign of unsolved grief. Her emotional fragility intensifies, which results in her becoming even more tentative around him. This creates a cycle. Natsuko reaches out anxiously, Mahito withdraws, Natsuko gets more emotional, Mahito feels more guilty and resentful. Neither one is trying to hurt the other, but their emotional wounds keep colliding in painful ways. One of the most important turning points in this relationship, though, is when Natsuko disappears into the magical world. Her disappearance changes everything because it forces Mahito to make a choice he hasn't been willing to make before. Instead of distancing himself, he immediately decides to go after her. This moment shows that no matter how difficult their interactions have been, Mahito does care deeply about Natsuko. Her vulnerability awakens his instinct to protect, to connect, and to step into a more mature role. For the first time, Mahito stops reacting from grief alone and starts acting from genuine emotional intention. Much in their relationship is expressed symbolically rather than directly. Natsuko represents imperfect but sincere love that tries, stumbles, and keeps trying anyway. His character shows that new family bonds aren't simple or clean, they're messy, emotional, and sometimes painful. The magical world Mahito enters is chaotic, surreal, and filled with shifting identities. This reflects his eternal emotional chaos as he tries to navigate the unfamiliar world. He's also learning to navigate his new family structure. Natsuko's presence in the world symbolizes the identity that emotional healing requires confronting both love and loss, not separately but together. By the end of the film, Natsuko becomes one of the quiet but essential forces behind Mahito's growth. She doesn't teach him through lectures or advice, instead, she teaches him through her vulnerability, her persistence, and her flaws. Mahito's journey to save her is also a journey toward accepting that love can take new forms without erasing the past. Natsuko helps him understand that families can evolve, that grief doesn't close the door to new connections, and that caring for someone doesn't betray the memory of someone else. Their relationship shifts from emotional tension to mutual respect, and even though we don't get a grand emotional resolution, the subtle change between them is meaningful. To conclude, Natsuko and Mahito's relationship is one of the emotional anchors of The Boy and the Heron. Their dynamic reflects the complexities of forming a new family after loss, full of misunderstandings, quiet anxiety, and small but powerful gestures of love. Natsuko's anxious, tender personality doesn't always make things easier, but it gives Mahito the space, even unintentionally, to confront his grief and move toward acceptance. Their bond reminds us that healing rarely happens in a straight line, and that sometimes the people who help us most are the ones who enter our lives after we think the story's already over. Thank you for watching.